Hello, and welcome to the Nano Film Improv Comedy Podcast. I'm Dave Heron. This is a podcast purely for my own catharsis to share with you the trials and tribulations, the struggles, the triumphs as I progress through my development journey in doing improv comedy. This isn't an expert podcast, so if you're coming here to listen to expert insight, I'm afraid you won't find it. What you will find is me whinging about how I'm struggling with certain facets of doing improv, but interspersed with that, hopefully, some tricks and tips that I've tried to assimilate from fantastic improvisers I've met along the way to improve my improv and get better. I've got a few years' experience, and I've been very lucky to do different forms of improv with a whole range of very, very talented improvisers from whom I've been able to garner some tricks, tips, and techniques to try and get better. So today we're going to be looking at fear and control on stage, something that I have been guilty of doing for certainly for the first few years. I was doing improv and probably still do it as well, and I notice flashes of it whenever I watch myself back on video. And this is really where somebody is trying to take complete control of the scene because there supposedly is an inbuilt fear that the improvisers need to have absolute certainty on stage and the audience needs to have absolute certainty. And if that certainty isn't there, then there's lots of panic and people don't really know what's going on and it all looks a little bit naff. Now, what's interesting is when you get improvisers who come along who in their day jobs are probably quite senior people in organizations, or they run their own business, or they're quite sort of extroverted, you tend to find that actually they can be quite domineering in scenes. And that's the number one symptom that I see in myself when I look back and watch at videos, that in my day job, I'm required to take decisions and take accountability for those decisions. And sometimes that can translate itself into doing improv, where I will dominate the scene because I perceive it as my role to provide certainty for other people. So actually, I think it probably tends to come from a good place of me trying to provide a safety net, a safety certainty net for the other improvisers to then go ahead and do their improv. But of course, when I look back at the videos, and certainly when I've seen other people do it as well, it doesn't come across that way. As we've talked about before, I believe strongly that the audience sees everything and they see when one improviser is dominating a scene. Now, I'm not talking about when a character, or sorry, where a scene has characters on a stage and there's one particular character that is a high status and is dominating. No, I'm talking here about when an improviser is dominating the scene, normally driven out of fear. I don't mean that in a dramatic theatrical sense, but a fear of there's no certainty here and I must create certainty and my role is to create that, which can be, as I say, derived from everyday life. So the number one symptom of this that I see in myself when I look back is over dominance. You can see it. It can take different forms where I'll be talking too much or doing lots of object work or speaking loudly and clearly, just little hints that probably in some regards maybe I only see, but I know that I'm doing it when I look back. Another symptom closely related to that is seeing myself telling others what to do, telling others how to feel, telling others exactly what's about to happen in that scene, planning the scene in advance. And that, for me, is a telltale sign of control in a scene. But actually, what it doesn't do is allow the other improvisers to explore the scene by doing improv. That can take the form of somebody talking a bit too much, certainly compared to the other improvisers on stage. Almost, in my novice opinion, linked to the fear of silence on stage as well, which I know we've talked about before. Again, you see this when improvisers come on stage, and I've done this, and there's one that I recall a few years back when the improvisers come on stage and establish the platform, the who, the what, and the where very, very quickly, all on their own. Now, I know that's a training technique that some groups and some courses run, and I think it's very good to know that those are key facets when building up a scene and certainly building certainty and clarity to the improvisers and the audience. But when taken to the extreme, when I look back on some of the videos I've done, there was one particular example where I was in a bakery and I came on stage and there was a little bit of object work at the very beginning. And then I immediately said, I'm in this bakery in this town here, and today we're going to be baking Belgian buns. I'm your manager. And it was very wooden and very clunky. But it came, as I said earlier on, it came from a good place, trying to provide that safety net. It also probably came from a place where I'd probably just done a course on the platform, was trying to drill it throughout the course of trying to establish the platform. So it was a little bit clunky and a little bit wooden. And actually, it didn't allow for the other improviser to create the platform with me. I planned it. I set it out. I told them what I was going to be doing. Again, it all goes back to the domineering of a scene. It came from a good place, but from an audience perspective, it can be perceived as controlling the scene, potentially out of fear. Interestingly, you might also see control being exhibited through subtle blocking, where somebody says, and I've definitely been guilty of this, seeing it in some of the videos back again, why don't we do this instead? Or the classic, yes, but, when the next bit along is my own idea, and let's do my idea instead. So how do you get that balance right? I think first and foremost for me, again, still really learning this, but it's to trust the other improvisers. Now, that can be difficult if you're doing a jam with people you don't know, or people who are just starting out on their improv journey, to put the onus on them. But I do think that if you're with improvisers who have got some experience, or certainly people that you know, and can be playful with too, I think you have to trust them, and each of you has to trust each other to build that platform and certainty together. And sometimes, and I know that some people may not agree with this, I don't think every facet of the platform needs to be built. That's one school of thought. And I know there are some schools that are completely opposite to that. But if you look at Mick Napier's stuff, which I've spoken about before, sometimes you can get almost too in your head about establishing something. And as I say, it can come across as dominating, wooden, clunky, etc. So trusting your other improvisers to complete the picture with you together is actually a very satisfying thing, and removes it away from this wooden perception to something that's more natural and collaborative. Catching yourself as well is important too. For quite a while, I would stop myself going on stage either first, or going on stage and doing most of the talking. I would actively stop myself from doing that and take a more sort of quieter, reserved role, which hopefully would then lend itself to being less dominating on stage. You could still have high status characters, but they didn't need to be talking constantly, loudly, and telling other people what to do. The classic case there, of course, is the army major who is telling everybody what to do, exactly what's going to happen, how they're going to feel, etc., which gives relatively limited improv development in the scene to other improvisers. And finally, watching other people perform is just a great learning experience. And this isn't about them being good, bad, or indifferent improvisers, because you can learn so much just from watching people and then reflecting on that afterwards and saying, well, do I do that? And of course, videoing it. I know some people don't like doing that, but actually looking back on it afterwards without being too critical is a good way to go, well, actually, how did I come across in that scene? Was I too overbearing? Was I too dominating? Did I allow other people the stage time as well? And one thing that I was taught very earlier on was splitting the time, space, and energy across all of the improvisers on stage so that it was shared equally. Even if that means you've got one character talking a lot and other characters are being more quiet. The point is that the airtime, the space on stage, is equally distributed. And that was a really good learning point that was given to me a number of years back, that you can see when you look back on a video or you're watching other people perform whether that actually works out in practice or not. Again, I'm a big believer that the audience sees everything. And if you can see it in your video looking back on yourself, which I've certainly been able to do on myself, or indeed see it when you're watching other people perform, it's pretty certain that other people, when they're watching you, see that too. So that was all I was going to really talk about today. I know that a number of far more experienced and expert improvisers than me have spoken a lot about control and fear, and it underpins a lot of the dynamics on stage. But those were just some of my reflections on some of the things I've struggled when I first started. I hope I'm getting a bit better at it. I feel like I am because I'm consciously aware when I'm on stage that my character is always trying to reach out to the other person, mainly because the dynamic I have between the two characters, as it currently stands, the things I'm working on right now tend to be not problems, but how can we be two peas in a pod? How can we be together? How can our characters be agreeing at the beginning? And that has lent itself to me as an improviser wanted to reach out to the other improviser on stage and share that experience. So hopefully it's a little bit less dominating. But as I say, I do catch myself sometimes dominating a scene when maybe I didn't mean to. Maybe I just wanted to provide some certainty and clarity, as I said earlier on. But it can be perceived as just being a bit naff and a bit unsupportive. So that's all I was going to talk about today. Thanks very much for joining me on the Nano Film Improv podcast. I'd love to hear your views. What's worked for you? What hasn't? What things are you struggling with still, particularly in the realm of control and fear? Have you caught yourself afterwards? And if so, how have you tried to remedy the situation for later sets? Would love to hear from you. Thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next one.